video, I'm going to show you step-by-step instructions on how to replace the front screen on the Samsung S21. Start off, as usual, we're going to put it on the heat plate set to 85 degrees C for about 5 minutes. This has already been sat here whilst I was prepping my camera and stuff. And because it's got this annoying little magnetic plate thing on it, we're not going to be able to squeeze the suction cup on there. So instead, I'm going to get some isopropyl alcohol and I'm just going to run it along the edge and let that soak in for a minute. And I mean, not a lot of people have one of these suction cups at home, so maybe it'd be easier to explain it this way. But we're going to take half a Dorco blade, single-sided, very fine razor blade, and we're going to create a very small gap in between the chassis and that back cover. Little separation in there. It looks almost invisible if it's not been opened before, but you're just going to insert it a couple of millimeters so that it makes a larger gap, just wide enough so that we can place this guitar pick in there. And then we're going to insert that a few millimeters too and begin running it down the edges. If you feel some resistance when you're running the pick through, add a few drops of isopropyl alcohol just to help it through. I'm not going to mess around this edge here. Instead, I'm going to go back round and go along this long edge, run some more alcohol in the gap, and then run the pick along, just sort of peeling it off at the same time as I'm doing it too. And then I'll do the same on this last bit here. Now I'm going to sort of peel it back like this. It's a bit awkward to get in where the camera is. As you can see, it comes off as a separate piece, but it's still attached to the back cover, if that makes sense. But that's removed now. Let's take it over to the workbench and take it apart further. Now that we're into the guts of the phone, there's about 13 crosshead screws up holding down the shields for the logic board and the rear camera. Take a crosshead screwdriver, ideally a magnetic one, and go ahead and start removing all those screws. Just as a little additional note, all these screws are the same size, so all you need to do is take them out one by one and store them on a little magnetic mat like this one. As we go through the guide, if there are any screws that are different sizes, I will make sure to point them out. But the good thing about these Samsung repairs is generally most of the screws are all equal. There might be a few more than 13 here, I might have miscounted. Sometimes though, I do find that they don't stick to the magnet, which is really annoying. There's 3 there, look. Once they're all removed, you can take the plastic spudger, get it underneath here, and we're just going to lift up the first half of this metal shield, which is going to reveal one connector just here for the battery. Make sure that's disconnected. And then there's one more just here for the wireless charging coil. Remove that too. And then you can sort of just fold this back and hold it out of the way whilst we go back up to the top. Disconnect this flex cable here. Don't worry about these 3 here. I'll explain that in a minute. Disconnect this one for, I think, the loudspeaker. And then with the plastic spudger, we can get underneath this plastic shield and remove the rest of it. This is absolutely filthy, this phone. Disgusting. We can also disconnect the volume cables, power and volume cables there, and the front camera too. Once they're all disconnected, we're just going to slide the spudger underneath the logic board so that we're sort of just freeing it away from the chassis so that when we're ready, we can easily pull it out. We'll fold this wireless coil back on itself now. And then we've got 6 more screws that hold down the loudspeaker and plastic shield for the subboard. Like I said before, these are all the same size as the other ones that you took out, so don't worry if they get a little bit muddled up on your magnetic mat. They all go back the same. Once you've picked up all the little ones that got left behind and didn't magnetize, you can have a look on this back cover, and usually what you'll find is there's a small arrow or a small opening point where you can fit the prying tool. On this one it's just here, and we can get the plastic spudger underneath and it'll just pop the loudspeaker and plastic cover off just like that. Store that safely for reinstallation later, and then we've got 3 more crosshead screws holding down the subboard at the bottom. Remove those three. Store them separately because they are a very slightly smaller screw than the rest of them. Then we can use the plastic spudger to disconnect the display cable. Use a little SIM ejector tool to pop the SIM out. Don't forget this step because the subboard won't come out without it. And then we'll use the plastic spudger again to get underneath this subboard and just pry it out. Just be careful when you're taking it out around the charging port because it can get jammed up a little bit there. With all that removed, we don't have to worry about disconnecting these flex cables. The reason for that is that we'll just take it out altogether. And the reason I don't disconnect any of these cables is often on Samsung devices, all these cables, the sub to main cable, the display cable, and the antenna cable, the connector that it sits into can be very fragile, and removing them and reinstalling them can put unnecessary strain on them. So I'll just remove them like that, keep them all together, and it means that you're not going to lose anything on a messy desk like mine. Unless the part that you've ordered came with a new battery, you're going to have to remove that next. So I'm just going to apply a little bead of isopropyl alcohol and let that soak in for a few minutes. Whilst that's soaking in, we're going to go up to the top of the phone and take a look at the front camera. I'm going to use a number 17 X-Acto blade because this front camera is actually held in place by some like cleary resiny glue. And I'm just going to wiggle it around to separate it from the chassis. Either side, it should cut through the adhesive, meaning that it's nice and easy to pull that camera out. I've seen other people using heat, but I've found that cutting it is a lot safer than risking heat damage to the camera. Once that alcohol's soaked in under the battery, we're going to attach a suction cup to it and then begin sort of wiggling it, and you should find that this will eventually lift up. You might have to add another bit of isopropyl alcohol just to help it, or perhaps even pry underneath it a little bit with the plastic pick. Don't use metal tools when prying batteries, and it should come out pretty satisfactory. So the important part that you've all come for is the part that we're using. It's a genuine Samsung service pack direct from our supplier that I will link in the description below, although I might forget. If I do, leave me a comment just to remind me. It comes with the frame already attached, the volume buttons, vibration motor, obviously no front camera, and nothing down the bottom either. Reassembly of this one is just a case of reversing the steps that we've just taken when disassembling the device, starting off with securing the battery back down. Then I'll just take out that little plastic cover on the front camera and bring over the full board and subboard all attached. And I'll start off by placing the subboard into place, get that secured down. Whilst I'm doing that, I'll just rest the logic board in place. I'm not going to secure it yet. So there was 3 of the smaller screws that were holding the subboard down. We'll go ahead and reattach those now. Don't forget to put the SIM tray back in. And then we can reattach the display cable, making sure that it clicks into place. It's also worth just applying a little bit of pressure to these other 2 to make sure that they've not come loose during handling. Let's get the loudspeaker and plastic shield back on there now. We'll apply pressure to secure it, and then get the 7 crosshead screws back into place. If you're a DIYer attempting this repair at home, let me know how you get on and if there's anything that you recommend doing different. I know that we've got a professional repair setup here, semi-professional should I say, and we do have access to tools and equipment that I know a lot of people don't just have offhand. So if you've got any tips and recommendations, they're always appreciated in the comments. Or if you think it's rubbish and not worth watching, you can comment that too. Now that that's secured, we're going to move up to the top now. I'm just going to make sure that this little flex cable's out of the way here so that we can secure the logic board back into place. Reattach that flex. We've got the front camera, what we can't forget. I promise I've done that before. Then we can fold the battery back a little bit and get the volume buttons in place. And you're not going to do any harm at this point by reattaching power to the device. You might just have to manipulate the flex cable for that a little bit to get it in place. Make sure that the cameras sit flat. It's probably worth, with these ones especially because this was a very dusty phone, we'll give it a little blowout. Next we're going to get this top shield in place, the plastic one with the ear speaker attached, and attach that connector there. We can now bring the wireless charging coil back over itself, reattach the flex cable for that, just there, fold it over and make sure that it sits right, Make sure you do it in that order. You need to put the plastic shield on before the metal shield. Just remember that. Now we'll go ahead with re-securing all those screws. And this is the part where I remind you that if you like repair content just like this, make sure that you are subscribed to our channel. You don't want to miss any important repair news or information, and also our weekly podcast where I generally just talk rubbish about repairing stuff. It's important to make sure that you've not got any screws left over. If you've got screws left over, just go back a few steps and make sure that everything is right. And if you've not got enough screws, it's probably because you've dropped one on the floor somewhere, so get on your hands and knees and have a look for that. Now we can just re-secure our back cover, which does admittedly make it look a bit poopy because we've got brand new chassis and edges and then this worn out sort of back cover, but I'm not in charge of what repair this guy has done. Obviously the moment of truth when you press the power button, and we've got picture. That just about completes this repair. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.